Welcome to this presentation by the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, opening minds and changing lives through the exploration and celebration of African American history and culture.
Welcome to JazzSpace Detroit, a history of some of Detroit's legendary jazz through the photography of Barbara Barefield with author Herb Boyd and special guests.
I love jazz and taking photographs. In the mid-1970s, I met Lenny and John Sinclair and Herb Boyd when we worked together on the Ann Arbor and then Detroit Sun newspaper. They introduced me to some great music, and I had the wonderful opportunities to meet and take photographs of many musicians.
It's an honor to be part of the Wright Museum's centennial celebration for Charlie Parker. For more than 45 years, I've had the honor of photographing thousands of jazz and creative musicians who were profoundly inspired and influenced by the music of Charlie Parker. Sadly, Charlie Parker died at the young age of 34, and I was only 4 years old at that time. My name is Barbara Barefield, and I'd like to share some photos and stories with you, along with some special friends of mine. Writer, scholar, historian, and jazz lover Herb Boyd will be joining me, as well as some incredible musicians and composers. Saxophonist Roscoe Mitchell, clarinetist, saxophonist Wendell Harrison, pianist Pamela Wise, amazing bassist Marion Hayden, wonderful percussionist Gayelynn McKinney, and my husband, jazz composer and guitarist A. Spencer Barefield. Bird's music lives on and brings great joy to our lives. But the inequalities and oppressive conditions that may have existed and caused his early death still exist today. But there is real hope for change, spearheaded by the Black Lives Matter movement. Music, art, and creative expression link our universal spirits to one another. It empowers our humanity and strengthens our capacity to love and overcome hatred, violence, and bigotry.
One of my first assignments as a photojournalist for the Ann Arbor Sun newspaper was to photograph the 1973 Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival, and what an exciting opportunity that was. John Sinclair was one of the main organizers and opened my ears and heart to some incredible music. Hearing Sun Ra and his orchestra was an epiphany. My life was never the same after hearing Sun Ra, Ray Charles, Count Basie, Charles Mingus, Johnny May Matthews, and many others. Johnny May was known as the godmother of Detroit soul and as the first African-American female to own and operate her own record label. The following year, I photographed the godfather of soul, James Brown, at the 1974 Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival. Detroit was and still is brimming with gifted musicians. My favorite spot to hear music in the 1970s was Cobb's Corner in the Cass Corridor, now known as Midtown. This is where I met my husband, composer-guitarist A. Spencer Barefield, when he was playing with the great avant-garde ensemble Rio Galaxy, led by saxophonist Farouk Zibay.
The hot jazz club was Cobb's Corner. And I'd go there with my friends and take photographs, and one night there was a new guitarist playing with Rio Galaxy.
That was me.
It was you.
Spencer would feature many of these musicians at the Detroit Institute of Arts in his 13-year Creative Arts Collective concert series. Entitled Creative Music at the DIA, he presented more than 100 concerts between 1979 and 1992, many of which were internationally broadcast on the radio. Just a few of the legendary composer-musicians presented, including virtuosic saxophonist, multi-instrumentalist, AACM and CAC founder Roscoe Mitchell, percussionist Andrew Surreal, saxophonist Oliver Lake, pianist and AACM founder Muhal Richard Abrams, violinist Leroy Jenkins, electronic computer genius and trombonist George Lewis, multi-reed bamboo flautist Douglas Eward, Art Ensemble of Chicago and its members, trumpeter Lester Bowie, percussionist Famadou Don Moyer, bassist Malachi Favors, and members of the AACM, BAG, and many others, the most accomplished composers and musicians of avant-garde jazz.
And it was about getting well-known, established guest musicians from all over the country to come work with Detroit musicians, and there would be an exchange of ideas and music, and something new would come out of it every time we did a concert. So
the house band for the series included Spencer with saxophonist Farouk Zibay, percussionist Tani Tabal, bassist Jaribu Shahid, and saxophonist Anthony Holland. They're standing in the back row of this photo. In the front row, we see saxophonist educator Donald Washington, who founded and led the bird-trained Sko Now education band and mentored some future stars such as James Carter and Cassius Richmond. And trumpeter Marcus Belgrave, who mentored dozens of future stars, including pianist Jerry Allen. In this photo, Spencer, Jaribu, and Tani are joined by a little violinist. That's our 4-year-old daughter, Janina. Determined to play music with her dad, she is now an accomplished violinist. You may have seen her string ensemble, Public Quartet, at the Detroit Jazz Festival, the Detroit Institute of Arts with their guest James Carter, or during their year-long residency at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Next year, they will return to Detroit to perform with Spencer, Roscoe Mitchell, and others on Spencer's future concert series. But looking back, Cobb's Corner, the DIA, the Wright Museum, and the Montreux Detroit Jazz Festival are just some of the spots where I heard many of the musicians Herb will tell you about, known as the Detroit Jazz Masters, and some of the musicians they inspired.
Barbara and I are just absolutely elated and excited, enthusiastic to be participants in this centenary, the celebration of the life of Charlie Yardbird Parker. What a phenomenal artist he was. And, you know, it's taken a veritable village of artists and activists to capture the magic and the magisterial flights that he had within the realm of music. In December of 1947, you have this here classic recording of Bird with one of his most formidable quintets. He's up front, like with Miles Davis, the great trumpeter. Of course, Miles stayed here in Detroit for a while. The pianist, Duke Jordan, and of course the bassist, Tommy Potter, performed so often with Bird. And also, along with him, kind of a usual companion, the battery of drums, the great Max Roach. And one of the tunes from that session was called Bluebird. And we speculate that possibly had an influence on Clarence and Mary Eddings when they founded the Bluebird Inn. And of course, you know, all the phenomenal musicians that performed there. That's like one of my favorite West Side locations. I live not too far from that place. And of course, as a young person, couldn't get in there, but you could stand outside and you could hear that music and hear these here formidable musicians that performed there. The Bluebird Inn. I mean, can never forget that location. Of course, the Paradise Theater, we have to keep that in mind in terms of the place too where Bird made an appearance. But one of the musicians that had a very direct connection with Bird was the pianist Barry Harris. He's 90 years of age and lives right here in New York City, where I live now, but my heart continues to be in Motown in Detroit. He has his workshops in Midtown Manhattan. 90 years of age, but still just as active as ever. But what most Detroiters remember about Barry Harris is that his mentoring that he did here in this city. One of the musicians that I went to school with was Roy Brooks. And Roy used to tell me stories about going through there and learning the kind of the fundamentals of jazz, particularly the improvisation. That was like Barry's forte. And the percussionist that he was, Roy picked up on a lot of those lessons. And some of those people who were with him at the house there on the west side was Charles McPherson. Charles, an outstanding alto saxophonist, and many feel that is perhaps the best descendant and one who captures the energy and creativity that Bird expressed. Of course, there is the Baron, Harold McKinney. Harold said that he first heard Bird, listening to one of those jukeboxes. It's a place where you can go and drop a few coins in there and hear all of his great music of the time. Harold said this is where he first heard the sounds of Charlie Parker, and it had a tremendous influence on him and forced him right into the kind of very, very imaginative creations that he's going to create in his life. See, he was a product of a very, very large and creative family. You talk about the McKinney clan, my goodness. Of course, there was Ray McKinney, outstanding bassist, and his daughter, Gayelynn, his second wife, Michelle Jara McKinney.
I am the oldest of his children, and so therefore I feel obligated to make sure his music stays alive. And so this McKinney project was very special to me because I called upon many of my friends and Dad's friends to do this project. So Marcus Belgrave and Wendell Harrison and Edward Gooch, who played on Voices and Rhythms of the Creative Profile, played on my McKinney record. And it was so interesting to be a grown-up, a grown person now, not 11, in the room with these guys playing with them on this music that I heard them do when I was 11. My peers were on there, Marion Hayden, James Carter, Regina Carter, the late, great Jerry Allen is on there. And so it was a wonderful tribute to my father, and it was done with a lot of love.
But we talk about McKinney within the context of the Jazz Masters. And this was an art award that was given to him by the Jazz Midwest. And by Jazz Masters, we're talking about the great trumpet player, no longer with us, that's Marcus Belgrave. What a popular performer he was in this city and elsewhere. And of course, there's Teddy Harris. We lost Teddy back in 2015. And add to that, the inestimable Wendell Harrison.
These are my comrades, that I've been working with for the last maybe almost 60 years. They named the streets after these guys. Marcus Belgrave has got a street after him now. Harold McKinney, the McKinney Way. Teddy Harris. And Roy Brooks made a world imprint, since the 60s. Roy Brooks and
you. In the late 1970s, I worked at the Detroit Free Press as art director of the Sunday magazine and learned the art of color tinting photographs from Tony Spina, the Pulitzer Prize-winning head of the photo department. Here are a few of my favorite photographs that I transformed from black and white by applying layers of translucent oil paints onto the photos with cotton balls and cotton wrapped around a toothpick. This was a method used to colorize photos before color photography. These were the days before computers, cell phones, and digital cameras.
And this is the Belle Isle and the Detroit River and an incredible apartment building. So I took the photograph and I blew it up to 11 by 17, black and white. I hand colored it the old-fashioned way.
Sippy Wallace was a blues and recording star in the 1920s. She moved to Detroit in the late 20s and was rarely seen except as her church organist for the next 40 years. In the mid-1960s, her friend, blues star Victoria Spivey, urged her to perform and record again, and in the 1970s, I met her. Here she is singing and playing the piano at a private party with her great-grandniece. Sippy had such style and became an international performing and recording star in her 70s and 80s. Here is another memorable image from Sippy's performance in New York at Lincoln Center with Coco Taylor, Big Mama Thornton, Little Brother Montgomery, concert organizer Rosetta Wright, and others from the Blues is a Woman concert at the Newport Jazz Festival in 1980. John Lee Hooker was another blues great, born in the South in the early 1900s. He spent time in Detroit and was a regular on Hastings Street in Detroit's Paradise Valley, according to Marcia Music, seen here with her late husband, artist David Philpott. Marcia's dad, John Von Battle, owned a record store and recording studio in Paradise Valley, where Hooker recorded and sometimes slept. It is also where Aretha Franklin made her first recording at age 14. Paradise Valley was the thriving business and entertainment center of Detroit's densely populated African-American residential area in Detroit, known as Black Bottom, from the 1920s through the 1950s. Here's where all the greats played, including Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan. Construction of freeways in the 1960s demolished this vibrant area, destroying hundreds of businesses and displacing thousands. In the late 1970s, I shot this photograph of the Clifford Fears Dance Theater downtown in front of the 606 Horseshoe Lounge, one of the last standing reminders of Paradise Valley, until it was turned to rubble in about the year 2000. Lafayette Park, I-75, Ford Field, and the Paradise Theater Orchestra Hall are located now where Black Bottom once stood. Paradise Theater is also where a 16-year-old Betty Carter won an important talent contest. Known for her scatting and improvisation, she later impressed the great Miles Davis, who recommended her to Ray Charles. She went on to perform with Ray and many other legendary musicians. Spencer's recording After the End includes this photo of Spencer flying through space on the cover. This LP also features the bass virtuoso Richard Davis, Andrew Cyrille on drums, and Oliver Lake on sax. It was recorded in 1989 when Spencer was presenting regular concerts at the Detroit Institute of Arts featuring hundreds of gifted musicians, including the young violinist Regina Carter, a teenage saxophonist James Carter, and pianist Jerry Allen, who was mentored by the great Marcus Belgrave.
No musical or jazz occasion was complete without Marcus Belgrave. How absolutely explosive he was as a musician, to say nothing of the kind of legacy that he carried with him everywhere he went. Talking about Ray Charles and Hank Crawford, some of the bands that he was in and out of over the years. But for the most part, you're talking about his own ensembles, and of course working in close association with the Baron, with McKinney, working closely with Wendell Harrison, and certainly being a part of Tribe. It's hard to talk about any kind of musical aggregation without mention of Tribe, And then, of course, you get to Wendell Harrison. You talk about another of the jazz masters. Okay, you've got him as a businessman. You've got him as an educator. You've got him as an entrepreneur. You've got him as a musician. And you can get him along with Pam Wise, his companion, his wife, outstanding pianist in her own right. And together, that combination, they got a new recording out right now that captures, some of the essence of their vitality, of their creative ingenuity.
In fact, I just released on the London label, the Strut London label, I released a Tribe LP with Harold's music, some of the music that wasn't released. This is the, can you see this?
Yes.
There are a lot of musicians on there, a lot of musicians. the old tribe up here with Charles Moore.
I see some of my photos there.
This is your photo, Barbara. This is you, Barbara. That's you, Barbara.
Yeah.
In the 70s, I released the Bebopper's Method book, which chronicled some of the lessons I took from Barry Harris, and I modified and expanded on it, and actually documented some of these exercises and etudes, jazz etudes, that would help students to play like Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, and Diz.
Wendell Harrison, hey, he kind of followed me at Northwestern High School. You talk about Northwestern High School, you got Charles McPherson, an outstanding alto saxophonist coming out of that school, to say nothing of, later on, Ernie Rogers, and of course the James Carter, who was the whole with the Bird Trains Go Now period, to say nothing of his own recording legacy, which is like extensive. Teddy Harris, I mean, almost any reed instrument that you could put in his hand, he drew from it. And for many, many years, he was the music director for Aretha Franklin.
I'm driving, and I get this call, and I answer the phone, and I started not to because it said no name, but I answered it. Something told me to. And she said, "Gayelynn?" I said, "Yes." Sounded like my mother. And she said, "This is Aretha." I said, "Aretha Franklin." Oh. I said, "Excuse me, let me just pull over." And that's when she, gave me a very quick list of things that I needed to prepare for because I was going on tour.
Teddy Harris, we got a shot of him on the soprano saxophone, and Barbara caught him in mid-solo in front of the Paradise Theater Orchestra. And if you look in that orchestra, you see what I would think to be representative of the music jazz community in this city, from a trombonist Ed Gooch for baritone saxophone, Beans Bowles. And Beans Bowles, a lot of people don't know his connection not only with the jazz community, but also with the Motown, and particularly with Stevie Wonder.
But I always wanted to be a jazz pianist. And when I first came to Detroit around in 1980, there was a wonderful lady that I met at the time, and her name was Jerry Allen. And, I was quite impressed by Jerry. Marcus and Wendell introduced me to her. Although Jerry was really on another level. I had just begun getting my jazz chops together, And there were other female musicians too that really encouraged me, such as Alice Coltrane, in particular the great Nina Simone, who was a wonderful pianist, composer, vocalist. She was a person that was very influential, and she always used her voice to speak out against injustice, and I think I kind of picked that up in some of the things that I would do, is to use your musical ability to also speak out against injustice and racism and what's going on in the world. Alice Coltrane was also a big influence, as she, was a wonderful musician that also played piano and harp and was married to the great John Coltrane. And, her managing, a household and being a wonderful musician, and she still was able to carry on her aspirations and her dreams. And, that's another part of it that we don't see, is being great homemakers and parents and mothers, and also being able to manage your career, which brings me to the great bassist Marion Hayden, Marion and I have worked together for many, many years. And I also always admired her. She just, no matter what, she just keeps like the Energizer Buddy. She just like those 24 hours, raised 2 beautiful sons and took care of her mother and never missed a beat.
Detroit is a great city to learn music in. And I was really fortunate in my household. I had a chance to listen to a lot of music. I heard a lot of jazz from my dad, who was a huge jazz lover. And I heard some more classical music and more kind of great American songbook music from my mother. That's what she enjoyed. And my parents were very forward-thinking people. They never said to me, girls don't play bass. So as soon as I got to about 12, first I started playing cello about age 9, but when I got to age 12 and wanted to play the bass, they went down to a store downtown in Detroit called Adelson's Music, which was on Broadway, and got me a bass. And as soon as I got that bass, I took it downstairs to my basement and started playing off of records, just listening and trying to copy everything I heard. Then I had a chance to meet Wendell Harrison, Marcus Belgrave, and Harold McKinney, and other great musicians at a summer youth program called Metro Arts. And this is one of the reasons why I know youth programs are so impactful. I was just really fortunate to be taken under the wing of some really fabulous musicians and some great vocalists here in Detroit too, people like Ursula Walker, Naima Chamberger. There's two great living vocalists that I've had a great opportunity to work with and learn so much from.
Tell me about Straight Ahead.
Well, I should say that Straight Ahead is a fabulous project that I've been involved with for over 20 years. But I should also say that I always had a template for women as musicians, not only vocalists but also instrumental musicians here in Detroit. So when I first used to go out and hear music, one of the folks I used to listen to was Norma Jean Bell. Norma Jean Bell was a fantastic alto saxophone player. When Straight Ahead came along in the late 80s, founded by Mickey Brady, and when Regina Carter came back to town in the late 80s, and that's when that band really came together. It was just a really great natural fit of just some excellent musicians who happened to be women.
We were on an exchange program to Switzerland because, you remember the Montreux Jazz Festival used to be a sister festival to the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland. So our group went to Switzerland to perform in the Montreux Festival, and a group from Switzerland came to Detroit to play in our Montreux Festival. We were just gonna do some stuff in the clubs during the festival. And we were rehearsing in this hotel room. Little did we know that somebody heard us and went to Claude Knobs, who was the director of the festival, and told him, about us and how we sounded apparently. And that ended up landing us on the stage opening for Nina Simone.
We have a fabulous cadre of women instrumentalists that come from Detroit. Regina, in my estimation, is really one of the greatest artists of our generation. Swing, swing, swing. Because the woman knows how to really swing a violin, which is a hard thing to do. There's not that many people playing the violin that really have been able to internalize the swing field the way Regina has. But I think the other thing that I think a lot about her is that, to me, she is the embodiment of what I consider to be the Detroit sound. My feeling of the Detroit sound is that you have the Detroit sound, then you have all the elements that the Black diaspora brings to the table. You have the elements of blues, you have the elements of funk, you have the elements of jazz, different kinds of jazz, avant-garde music. You have all these elements, and that you're able to play those authentically because it really is in the drinking water here in our town. And when I think about Shahida Nurullah, also someone that I've known, I think Shahida and I met when we were 14 or 15. First of all, her voice is elegant and pure. There's a purity to her voice that I don't hear often in vocalists. If you've heard Shahida once, you will never forget her voice. And people often come to her and say, I heard you such and such, and I just never forgot you. Her voice is unforgettable.
Now on to another one of our very favorites, Gayelynn McKinney.
Gayelynn, my sister, my rhythm sister. Gayelynn has been my right hand for in the rhythm section for so many fabulous years. On a professional basis, Gayelynn is orchestral. That's one of the things that I love about her playing. Not only is her time impeccable, but when she plays the drums, she also listens from the standpoint of a composer, because she is a composer.
Could you talk to me briefly about the importance of women in jazz? There aren't very many women percussionists, so you really are one of the trailblazers.
There are a lot more women percussionists now than when I was growing up. I was felt pretty alone when I was growing up. You know, I remember I was standing at the bus stop and this little girl said, "You play drums. Drums are for boys. You shouldn't be playing drums." And I said, "Well, I like drums. I'm a girl, and I like playing the drums." And it made me feel really bad. And so I almost quit until my father came home and said, "You know, I saw another little girl playing the drums." He had gone to New York, and she was playing with Clark Terry. I said that to me. I was so excited. I said, "Oh, what's her name?" And that little girl, who was 8 at the time, turned out to be Terry Lynn Carrington.
Wow. Beginning in 2007, Spencer and I, through the Creative Arts Collective, along with our neighborhood organization, the Palmer Woods Association, launched Palmer Woods Music and Homes, a series of jazz, classical, and world music, and some blues too, concerts held in the majestic homes and gardens in Detroit's historic Palmer Woods. We began the series to support the arts and change Detroit's image at that time as a city of decay and ruins. We knew better and wanted to showcase that Detroit was, and is, filled with some of the world's most gifted musicians and artists, and fabulous neighborhoods and architecture. We presented many of Detroit's most celebrated musicians for 13 years. As a very Detroit-centric concert series, we focused on musicians who live in Detroit or who had very strong connections to Detroit, including musicians who had won top arts recognitions as Kresge Arts Fellows and eminent artists, as well as National Endowment for the Arts Heritage awardees. By the time we had to halt the concerts in March due to COVID-19, we had presented more than 120 performances, including several free concerts each year for children and their parents and teachers. We look forward to resuming the series in the future when it is safe to do so. And we thank the many homeowners who opened their doors each month and welcomed 100 to 200 plus people to celebrate music and share the beauty of their historic homes. It's been a great way to develop friendships when we enjoy music and support the arts. You met Spencer in the early 1970s when he was going to school at Michigan State, and you were there living and inspiring a lot of young musicians. Can you talk a little bit about meeting Spencer and helping to create the Creative Arts Collective, which is our nonprofit arts organization for Detroit that mirrored and tried to extend some of the vision of the work that you were doing with the AACM?
It was definitely inspiring to me as well to meet Spencer. I mean, to have someone around with that kind of knowledge to help me put that together, you know. At Michigan State, they opened their doors for us. The AACM was founded because musicians wanted to be a little bit more in control of their own destinies. We had sat down and took a look at some of our great masters that didn't fare that well on their own. So we wanted to have a place where we could present concerts of our own original music.
Can you talk a little bit about some of your memories of coming to Detroit and being part of the Creative Arts Collective in Detroit and the Creative Music at the DIA series?
Yeah. I mean, some of those concerts were very, very exciting. I mean, I remember the time we were at this concert of this high school, you know, and everybody was up there playing and so on, and it sounded great. And then pretty soon the janitor put down his broom and picked up his alto and started to play and just, you know, blew everybody away. I mean, it's like Detroit has a long-lasting history of having great musicians there, and so many great memories. We have great concerts from there. Bird Train Skull Now was there. James Carter was in that band, and not to mention the greats like Marcus Belgrave, and it's just too much to mention. And there's a reason. Spencer would bring us there to Detroit. We'd come into your house, as you know that, and live there and have our rehearsals and stuff like that. So that, I'm ready to get back to that kind of interaction again, you know, now, because that's really the real next step for the people that want to take the music on to the next level.
We can't wait to have you back in Detroit, Roscoe, and to be able to have live music again in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our 40-year reunion.
Actually, it'll be closer to 50 years by the time we actually get together.
We did get a little sidelined by a thing called COVID.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be so great because it's going to be Roscoe writing a new piece for my ensemble, which features a new generation of up-and-coming phenomenal musicians. And with our daughter Janina's string quartet, Public Quartet, will be a part of that project.
I'm very excited about coming back to Detroit to perform, you know, and premiere these new compositions and so on.
Another thing, you just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and you did major performances in Ann Arbor at Edge Fest, and then did a world tour. And that is just an amazing, 50 years of the Art Ensemble. And there were all these new musicians working with new young folks. That is quite an amazing feat.
That's all part of our work. We nurtured that, and that's why we have all these young people now, these talented young folks that are there to join us and further this vision.
Herb and I are signing off on this Labor Day weekend. This time last year, we were sitting next to each other in a huge crowd downtown at the Detroit Jazz Festival, listening to some incredible music like Kenny Garrett and Shahida Nurullah, and thinking about years past with some just incredible music.
I always look forward to being there. You know, I'm living in New York now, but the Jazz Festival there, it's always a heartbeat in me. So each time I was brought back there to be a part of the Jazz Tent, so we could talk about, you know, some of the books, for example, even JazzSpace Detroit, you know, and you know, books that come out, as well as what the Mark Stryker and what Kim Herron and some of the writers there have done over the years. So I always thank Jim Gallard and Lars Bjorn for bringing me out there for the Jazz Tent. Don't forget about the writers.
Hopefully next year we'll be able to do it again. This year it's virtual, so people all over the planet can hear this great music coming out of Detroit. But also Labor Day weekend, and on this Labor Day, we want to pay tribute to the essential workers, those people that have really helped us through these very, very tough times. And that includes our musicians and our artists and our writers. And we also want to remember those who have continued to keep our history and our legacy alive. I love this photograph of the late Congressman John Conyers with the late Marcus Belgrave and the New Orleans jazz master, Charlie Gabriel. Could you just, you knew Congressman Conyers very well. Why don't you share a little bit of your memories of him and how important he was to supporting the arts and equality and justice?
He was certainly an advocate for the arts, Barbara. I had an opportunity to be close with him over the years, covering him as a politician, but also we should not forget the role he played in Congress in helping artists out, making sure the funding, the pipeline of funds were coming through for our artists out there who are so often ignored. He was kind of a musician himself. He played a little bit of, saxophone. He was pretty good there. But more than anything was that kind of legislative role he played there, the kind of advocate for the artists. And of course, with Marcus Belgrave, he was always close to me. I mean, what a phenomenal musician, very popular. You couldn't say jazz in Detroit without saying the next word, the next name would be Marcus Belgrave. Joan Belgrave, his wife, continues his legacy as a vocalist out there. And of course, Charles Gabriel. I mean, I think he's still with us, right, Barbara, down in New Orleans?
He's up in his 80s, but he's in New Orleans, and up until recently was directing the Preservation Hall Jazz Band in New Orleans. So Herb and I are...
Put together a family history on it, too.
Re-release.
Yay! Speaking of books.
That's right.
I know that book.
Yeah, we put it together in 1979, 1980. And we're going to re-release it because very few copies were available back then, and they're collector's items now. So go onto my website, barbarabarefield.com, to pre-order it. It'll be to you in time for the holidays, and Herb will be writing a new intro for it. And then in 2021, we'll be working on the sequel with 40 more years of photographs, some of which you got to see today. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Till then,
it's a wrap.
Support our musicians, explore the sounds, and stay healthy.
Stay healthy, y'all.
Miss
Love you, Barbara. Love you, Detroit.